Hello and welcome to the Trauma Treatment Collective vlog. Today we're going to be talking about how to help clients navigate through their defense responses to this invisible threat of COVID-19 and helping clients to really track their defense responses and being able to identify healthier ways of moving through this. We don't want this pandemic to be another trauma for our clients that gets unprocessed and it kind of builds on all the traumas that they've had. So this is a great opportunity, in my opinion, to really help them to notice, okay, what's happening for me and how do I want to move through this differently? How do I want to use this as an opportunity to really tap into the work that I'm doing and to really, move through this in a healthier way so that it's kind of breaking that pattern within their nervous system and they're choosing to do something different. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how do you help clients with that and how do you move clients through that. I want to mention that I recently did a webinar where I talked specifically about this. It's a 45 to an hour long webinar where I just briefly kind of went over some ways of really providing psychoeducation to your clients in reference to their defense responses and using this as an opportunity to be able to help them to identify their defense responses as well as to kind of normalize them and then to do something different, to move in a different direction. So I'm going to put that down in the description so that you can click on that webinar if you'd like to watch it. It's a free webinar. You'll just have to share your email address with me to get it, and I'll send it directly to your inbox and you can check it out and kind of see if it's something that might be helpful as you're providing support to your clients. So for today though, I just want to give a brief overview of things that you can think about as you're helping clients with different defense responses. If you want some more information, go to that webinar. There'll be definitely more information there for you to be able to consume. So let's start with providing psychoeducation. So I think the first thing we have to do is really help clients to understand what a defense response is. Why do we have a defense response? What is it all about? And I think that will help to normalize the defense response. So sometimes clients can be like, well, why am I responding this way? I don't like the way I'm responding. I don't like the way I feel. And they can get really kind of critical of themselves and really hard on themselves. And I feel like that kind of locks them into the pattern. So if we can normalize it and say your response is your defense response, and that's okay. Let's just not get stuck in that defense response. Let's move through that defense response and kind of move back to your window of tolerance, or what I like to call your river of life. Let's move back towards that versus kind of getting stuck in this place of just hypervigilance or hyperarousal or hypoarousal. If you know anything about the window of tolerance, which was coined by Dr. Dan Siegel, the window of tolerance talks about, hey, here we have this optimal place that we want to be where we feel our most regulated. And then we have the hyperarousal and the hypoarousal. Hyperarousal is more of the anxiety presentation. Hypoarousal is more of the depression presentation that we see a lot in our clients. And so providing them with that psychoeducation will be really helpful in helping them to kind of move through that and understand that and make sure that they really have a clear understanding that we are all built to have these responses. The goal is just not to get stuck in these responses and to move through them and let them move through our system. The second thing I want to do is having them become master trackers of their nervous system. So being able to identify, okay, where am I? Am I in my window of tolerance? Am I hyper aroused? Am I hypo aroused? Like, where am I and what do I need to do to get back? And so you want to start helping clients to really take moment to moment assessment of where they are. So being able to feel, okay, I'm feeling really anxious, so I'm hyper aroused. Okay, what can I do to kind of move myself back to a more regulated place? Or I'm feeling really disconnected, really disoriented, not so much in touch with what's going on, so I may be hypo aroused, and how do I move myself back? So having them become master trackers of where they are, and I'm doing my hand like this because I have an actual sheet that I will link in the description section it's kind of like almost like you can put it inside of a pocket, a sheet protector, and I have clients come sometimes write on that to be able to, as we're talking about things, kind of track where they're at and what that feels like for them. And that's a really great way of having clients to be able to identify, okay, where am I and where am I trying to go? And what helps me get to that place? And the third thing is normalizing defense responses. So I mentioned this already, but I really want to take a little bit of time and really help you to understand like how powerful it is if we normalize defense responses. Like I said, clients can get really hard on themselves. They can almost shame and blame themselves for having natural responses to a situation that's stressful. And so a lot of times they expect so much out of themselves, and their expectations are so high that it's unreachable, it's unattainable, especially when you're in a stressful situation. And so the more we can normalize and help them to normalize their defense responses, the more it doesn't lock those patterns into place, and it allows it to move through their system so that they're able to really be able to say, okay, I felt that way, but I don't feel that way now. And it's kind of moved through. And I always tell clients, it's like waves, and waves are going to come and go. And so even if that same wave comes, it has to go. And so I may be feeling really okay right now, but later in the day, I may feel another wave come through, and I let that wave move through, and then I move on. One of the things that I've noticed for myself is just feeling almost trapped in my house. And so what I've been able to do, and sometimes even trapped on earth, what I've been able to do is kind of imagine myself going to outer space in a ship. And that may sound crazy and it may sound weird, but it's my way of allowing that defense response to be completed. So as I imagine myself kind of going out into space, it allows that energy to move through and settle, instead of just me feeling trapped and kind of walking around the house feeling anxious and, maybe snapping on my family or doing something that I regret and I have to go back and say I'm sorry about. But if I allow that energy to move through and settle, then I don't have that huge response where I have to shame and blame myself. So that's one way that I have found that if I normalize it, accept it for what it is, and help it to move through my system, then it really helps me to be more present, and it helps me to have natural responses that we all are going to have to this situation, but to not get stuck in those patterns of responses. So, as you're looking at defense responses, really thinking about, okay, what are the traumas that my client has went through? What are their responses that I've seen over time, if this is a client that you've worked with over time? And then looking for those responses in their present day situation. So if I have a client who has a tendency to kind of move towards fight, then I may be helping them to identify ways to release that fight energy in a positive way. So like I just experienced, I have a tendency to move to fight energy. So we've been doing some volunteer work. And so what are some things that you can do that help you to feel like you are fighting this threat in a way that's positive to you? And so every time that I do that, I feel a little bit of a release of, okay, I'm doing something. I got my hands to the grind, and I'm helping in the situation, and I'm doing something. If a person has a tendency to want to flee, again, you can kind of see mine is fight or flee. So I will allow myself to, go off into space and, on an imaginary trip to space, what that might be like. And then if a person has a tendency to move to freeze, then I may be getting them up and having them be more mobile in their bodies. So taking little walks or doing stretch activities or doing some yoga stuff. Some of my clients have shared with me some resources that they have found to be really helpful. Some free yoga classes and things like that are online to help people to be. So these are just some ways that clients can really be able to move with their defense responses, not get stuck in their defense responses, and to help that energy just move through their bodies so that they can stay in a more regulated state. Hopefully this has been helpful for you. Like I said, there is a link to a free webinar that talks a little bit more about defense responses and how to help clients identify their defense responses, how to provide psychoeducation to them about their defense responses so that they can be more apt to not kind of repeat the same old patterns, but to do something different and use this as an opportunity to grow and to move more towards healing for themselves. So have a great rest of your day. I'm so excited.